The Craftworld Aeldari have arrived in the world of Warhammer 40k Gladius, bringing a new race, playstyle and a whole bunch of new units to the battlefield. We'll take a look at all of the new units available at all of the different tiers. I'll give a brief explanation of their abilities and role within the army, and I'll try to tooltip over everything, so feel free to pause the video if you wish to have a read. Also realise that the stats that you see on the units might not be their base stats, some of them might be buffed up from research and whatnot. So let's see what the ELDAR are bringing to the Gladius table. Starting off with the tier 1 units and your first hero, the Ortak. While he does have some good armor, he doesn't have much in the way of health, so you do have to be a bit careful with him. He is capable though of putting out a whole lot of damage with 3 different weapon choices. The power sword for all his melee needs, his fusion pistol which is a melter weapon, great for that armor piercing penetration, and Mandi blasters, so he can shoot people with his face. So a nice bunch of damage output options. He also has jump pack, so he can jump himself in or out of trouble. Kane's might, an ability to increase his damage output. Command, an ability to increase the accuracy of nearby units. And Ortak's assault, which will give a damage increase to nearby friendly units when the Ortak gets a kill. So he can step up and do some damage when he needs to, but he's going to be best off with the support of troops that he can buff. Next, your most basic of basic infantry, the Guardians. While they do have a little bit of armor on, and there are 6 of them in the unit, they don't have a lot of health, so they are more squishy than they might appear, so don't expect them to stay alive if you're careless with them. They do, however, do a hell of a lot of damage and can wipe out certain units in one fell swoop. So very much a glass cannon as you would expect with elf factions, although you can upgrade them with armor later on and they can get some grenades, so great damage output but not very tough. And then we have a pretty sweet unit in the Rangers, who are, as you might expect, a long-range sniper type unit who are not very tough but can pack a big punch on the right targets. Their main rifle lacks armor penetration, so they're going to need to target those lighter troops. They do have a nice 3 range on that though, so they can stay well out the way while blasting their foes. They also have a bunch of abilities to aid their stealthiness. First of all, they have infiltrate, which means they won't set off overwatch if they should run near enemies. They also have move through cover, so they won't be slowed down by forests and cities like other units. They also, like all of these ELDAR units, have the ability to attack and then move instead of the other way around, allowing for some nice skirmish play. Next in the tier 1, the Shining Spears. These are literally just your scouting units. They have very little health, so don't expect them to do too much in a fight, but they do have some useful abilities for their purpose. A radar, some extra movement, and jink to help them potentially avoid some damage. On to the tier 2, beginning with the Howling Banshees. I think you can see what these ladies are bringing to the table. Not a ton of armor, not a ton of health. There are 7 of them in the unit, which is quite a lot. So again, not very tough, but guess what? Big damage dealing up close in the melee with their mighty power sword. And they do have a pistol as well, so they can shoot flyers and things. Only short range though at 1, just like the Guardians. So a very good damage dealer, got a bit of armor penetration, but a fragile unit altogether. Our next hero on the board is the Spirit Seer, our caster of the bunch. Naturally, he's wearing a dress, so don't expect him to survive very much or to do any damage in melee. He can do a little bit at range, but mostly he's all about his abilities. Spirit Mark, which can increase the accuracy of Wraith Blades and Wraith Knight units. Renewer or Destructor, which means he can either heal an ally or damage an enemy, so a nice versatile ability. Embolden or Horrify, which means he can increase the morale of a friendly unit or reduce it of the enemy. And Hallucination, for reducing enemy attacks. On to tier 3 with some artillery. Vol's Wrath Support Battery. It is of course a long range weapon, so you can be a long old way away from your enemies. It doesn't have a lot of armor penetration though, so it really needs to go after the lighter targets, although damage does scale with the target unit's max movement, increasing the armor penetration damage, so can be more useful on the right targets. Now to another hero in the tier 3, Farseer Skyrunner. Got some decent armor, but again not super tough. Good movement and agility on that bike though. Can do some decent damage with his couple of weapons, the Witch Blade and the twin-linked Shuriken Catapult. But as a Psyker, his strengths are in his abilities. He has Scout and Jink, just like the Shining Spears on the similar bikes. He has Mind War, which will reduce the accuracy of the targeted enemy unit and deal damage based on the difference between his morale and the unit he's targeting. So some big damage potential there. He also has Doom, which will increase the amount of damage an enemy takes by 66%, which is a hell of a lot. Great for those focus firing strategies. And the Will of Asuryan, restoring allied units' morale. So a nice mobile hero with some strong abilities. On to tier 4, beginning with the Fire Dragons, the big boys of the bunch. These are your heavy infantry. They've got good armor, but still not a lot of health, and there's only 5 of them in the unit. But boy, can they put out some damage. Big armor penetration. These are the ones putting the hurt on the big targets, the heavily armored targets, the vehicles. Their fusion gun melter weapon packs a punch, but they're not very tough, so you've got to be careful with them. Keep that healer nearby, because they can do some work. Also in the tier 4, the Avatar of Kane. No prizes for guessing what this big fella is going to be up to. He's got some armor and a decent amount of health. Big damage on his melee weapon, the Wailing Doom, and big damage on his ranged weapon, the Wailing Doom again. So this fella is all about the DPS, and that is not it. His abilities also aid this with 2 powerful passives. One, the Aura of Fear, reducing nearby enemy units' morale by 2, and the other increases nearby friendly units' damage by just a whole bunch of ways. Basically, he does a lot of damage and he makes everyone else do more damage. He's all about the DPS. So you can have him lead the charge and bring the extra damage for everybody else for some serious killing power. And for the only tier 5 unit we have, the Wave Serpent. It's a transport tank for the most part. It can do some damage and it's pretty tough, it's a tank, but you'll mostly be using this to get your boys around the field. It does have a couple of useful abilities, Jink to reduce enemy accuracy to help it survive, and Serpent Shield, which will let out a shield blast, ignoring enemy cover and reducing their movement for the turn. And into tier 6 we have another tank, the Fire Prism. It's not quite as tough as the Wave Serpent, but it does have some better weapons on it. The Prism Cannon, which will do more damage as many weapons do when you haven't moved already, so if you stay put, fire and then move, you'll do more damage than if you move and fire. And you can also switch the weapon types around to deal with different targets, which is a really nice feature. You can switch it depending on what kind of enemy you're facing. You can have Lance, Focused or Dispersed for all your blasting needs. And Linked Fire, which can increase the damage and armor penetration of a targeted friendly fire prism, so they can team up with other tanks. Also in the tier 6, the Wraith Blades. This is a very simple unit. Got some decent armor, but not a great deal of health for the amount of them that there are and the size of them, but boy do they pack a punch with their Ghost Axe. Good armor penetration, good damage, straight up melee unit, no fancy abilities. They're going to have to get up close and personal, but they can do some nice damage in the melee, and even more if they're supported well by the right hero, or perhaps the Avatar of Kane. Into the tier 7 we have the Crimson Hunter, the first aerial vehicle we can make once we construct the appropriate building. It's got some great movement range of course, great for scouting, great for checking things out, but it can also drop a whole bunch of armor piercing damage as well with its Bright Lance and its Pulse Laser. So some great aerial support and nice armor penetrating damage for those tougher targets, or cities. Tier 8 will bring you this big fella, the Wraith Knight. He's so big I need to zoom out and we'll look at him from this distance. He's got a nice bit of armor on, a good bunch of hit points at 72. His Sun Cannon can do a nice bit of damage, but his Star Cannons, which you can get 2 of with some research, it's all going to pack some big tasty punches to the enemy's faces. He also has a passive, the Scatter Shield, which will reduce enemy accuracy and give him some damage reduction to help keep him safe, because obviously he needs it. He can also move through cover like the Rangers, and a bunch of other units can do that as well. Also a jetpack to get around the map and strike down to reduce enemy movement. A powerful and disruptive adversary for any faction. Also in the tier 8, the Warwalkers. They don't have a great deal of armor on at only 6, but they do have a hell of a lot of health for only 3 of them in the unit, so they might be tougher than they look. They've got a whole lot of Bright Lances with good armor penetration, good damage all round from those, and Star Cannons as well, so they're just packing all the punches of the Wraith Knights in a compact and mobile form. They also have Scouts so they can check out the area. A strong, versatile little unit. Into tier 9, it's another flyer with the Hemlock Wraith Fighter. Kinda similar to the Crimson Hunter, packing a much bigger punch though. It also has a bunch of abilities. The Aura of Fear to reduce enemy morale, so spooky whenever it's around. Jink to reduce enemy accuracy. Vector Dance to increase its armor, so good for helping keep it alive. and shrouding to give nearby friendly units ranged damage reduction. So a versatile flyer, great for scouting, but also lots of damage to be output and some nice support abilities. And lastly, into tier 10, it's the big boy, the Scorpion tank. Good armor, a whole ton of hit points, and as you might have guessed, a whole scheisse ton of damage output. Big guns on this, lots of damage, decent armor penetration. You get the idea. It's big, it's tough, it hits hard. It's a freaking Scorpion tank. It causes fear as well, obviously, so a few of these in your army will take you far. So there you go, all the new units in the Craftworld Aeldari DLC for you to get your mitts on. I hope you've enjoyed this, thanks for watching, I will see you in the future.